Hi, everyone. This is going to be episode 2 on our issue of the Shapira Scrolls. And so after I did that video and I shared it privately, the person I sent it to made some comments. And I wanted to investigate more into what was the initial reasons by the top experts who concluded that the Shapira Scrolls were frauds back in 1883. I want to examine what did they say was the evidence that they had, because again, we don't have any of the documents anymore. They were all destroyed and lost. There are some handwritten notes that Mr. Dershowitz is looking at, but as I already said in the last episode, those appear just to be the notes of the fraudster who's trying to draft, and he's changing his mind about things. That doesn't mean it's an ancient document. Okay. Anyway, so this question I ask here is, why did the 1883 top expert primarily rely upon the Ten Commandments text inside the Shapira Scrolls to declare the Shapira Scrolls a fraud? Okay. It was in this article, the Athenaeum, 1883, and he actually had, this is probably the best. Someone had meticulously copied to encapsulated what was there, that the photographs are all lost. We can't tell, but this is it. Somebody hand wrote out to try to match what was on the page and then said the analysis that you're going to hear. So this is if you ask me, this is our best evidence of what the Shapira Scroll looked like, although all the photo plates are gone. And this is his analysis. Oh, I'm sorry to tell the current experts who are trying to intrude here and give their own new analyses. This is the guy who's telling you what this means at the time, looking at the originals and comparing the originals against this handwritten version that he had made and others had made to replicate it. So they obviously didn't trust photographs, and they were right not to do so. So let's take a look at what he relied upon. So I'm going to read this straight. So the Shapira, now this is actually where it starts. It's only two columns. See this? It's very short. And he's referring to a prior article he did, but this is where he specifically says he says it's a clear forgery, relying heavily upon the Ten Commandments portion of it, but he has other arguments too. But let's listen to it straight. The accompanying facsimile of the Shapira MS of the Deuteronomy is of one slip containing 4 columns. It exhibits not only the whole of the Decalogue, 10 Commandments, but the portion which corresponds in the Hebrew Scriptures to Deuteronomy 6, 4-9, that's the Shema, verses 6-18, given in the Athenaeum for August 11th, page 178, columns 2 and 3. I just want to say this to people. You can read Wikipedia and other sources that just say this Shapira Scrolls did not have any law but the 10 Commandments. Well, the answer to that is it doesn't even have the 10 Commandments at all properly, okay, and it's deleted one of the 10, so and replaced it with a totally different one. We'll get into that. But nobody in these encyclopedic sources will tell you, oh, the Shema is there. So this friend of mine commented that the Shema was there, so I verified that is true. And here it is. This gentleman says the Shema is there. Shema is a command. Love the Lord their God with the whole heart, mind, and soul, besides that God is one. And so it's a combined, synthesized commandment in Deuteronomy 6, 4-9. Why these other sources would say there was no command, no law, but the 10 Commandments and this one extra one, do not hate your neighbor, I don't know. But I just want to let you know that's a misleading statement. And I did rely upon it in the last episode to tell you that's what Wikipedia says, but that's wrong. Okay, let's continue. My friend called Wikipedia God Wikipedia or something, and he's right. I mean, we can't make it a God. It can be wrong from time to time. Let's continue. It will be seen that whilst in the Decalogue, the words are not only separated. So he's saying when you look at the 10 Commandments section, the words are not only separated, but each of them has a point after it. That's a big difference. Why would you do that? You're separating the words and you've added a point after each word. Then he goes on. But each of them has a point after it. The other portion is written continuous. So why is this added with points? He's like, that's very suspicious. It is in column I, line 5 of this facsimile that the word, and I don't know Hebrew, so I have no idea what it was, but he translates it at frontlets is spelled, and then it gives you another version. And you can see, if you just look at the Hebrew words lettering, they do seem somewhat different. Thus betraying both the ignorance of the scribe and the nationality of the forger. So he's trying to say this implies somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. Okay, let's continue. In my first decipherment of the manuscript as published in the Athenaeum of August 11th, page 178, column 3, I could not make out line 7 in column 3 of the facsimile, since it was canceled and obliterated by the forger of the manuscript. I therefore simply gave the line which he substituted for it. After much trouble, however, I have succeeded in deciphering it, and I exhibit it in the facsimile. That's the one we're looking at, I showed you earlier. It is as follows: Thou shalt not steal aught of the property of your neighbor. I am God, your God. On mature consideration, the forger was evidently displeased with his Hebrew composition of this commandment. He therefore canceled it and substituted for what is now his sixth commandment. This is one of the strongest of the proofs which brand the document as a forgery. So he's literally saying you can tell by what he's doing in this that he is canceling it out and then substitutes it with something else, which is now the sixth commandment, showing somebody is rewriting and re-editing the text on the page. The expression "bear false witness" in the eighth commandment of this document is not the plural from, and then I don't know these Hebrew words, as some of those who reproduced the Athenaeum articles have supposed. So other people have replicated this and then made their own comments and misunderstood what he had said, but is intended to be the second person singular from the root, some Hebrew word, in imitation of this archaic form on the Moabite stone, a fraudulent document, as I'm informed from writings currently that say that's another document or material that Mr. Shapira had provided earlier, claiming it was original, seeking lots of money for it, but that was determined to be a forgery, as I recollect, where it occurs twice. See lines V and VI in my edition of that inscription. Liberated thee in the first commandment, that's in Shapira Scrolls, is not taken from the Targum. So somebody had suggested that, but from the ancient Hebrew coins. So why would ancient Hebrew coins be used to write the book of Deuteronomy? That's what I think he's saying, where such and such a liberation is used in the legend. The forger also studied these coins for his alphabet. So he's also saying the alphabet you're looking at mimics how people wrote those letters at the time of these Hebrew coins, which obviously are not the same as those that existed in the time of Moses, what he's indicating. Probably there were no coins in the time of Moses. They had no currency at the time. They're a nation on the run, right? When all of these things happen on Mount Sinai. For the tracing, I am indebted to the accomplished Miss Tennant and to Miss Boscomwell, whose large practice in copying Assyrian inscriptions specially qualifies him for such delicate work. The facsimile was made under my strict superintendence, and I can therefore vouch for its accuracy. So he himself personally verified those letters that I showed you at the beginning do match what was on the leather straps that Shapira had produced and said, these are what I was found. Somebody gave it to me. I think it's authentic. And now they're verifying it isn't authentic. It's forged. And there's no doubt in their minds. I mean, it's just like, it's clear as day. All right. So since we've been pointed at the Ten Commandments in order to verify this text, according to the original experts who looked at this, I decided to take a look at Nichols' book called Moses Scroll, which is a translation and commentary on the Shapira Scrolls. Then there's Dershowitz's Valediction of Moses, which his name is the name he uses for the same document, for the same Shapira Scrolls. And I wish these scholars would have come to agreement of just calling them the Shapira Scrolls. But I think what's going on here is because he died in infamy as a forger and proven conclusively, according to scholars, multiple scholars working independently, including the British Museum scholar, which I haven't even talked to you about yet. Everybody wants to give it a different name, just get it away from Mr. Shapira's own name. I'm going to call it the Shapira Scrolls, but I'll respect the people who wrote these books under these titles, and I'll credit the source for each of those titles of what I'm looking at. All right. But anyway, each one of these guys, Nichols and Dershowitz, provides a translation of the Ten Commandments in the Shapira Scrolls, but each provides no side-by-side comparison to the Ten Commandments in the current Bible, in the Torah. So it's really, to me, it's not proving your case if you don't test the proposition of this guy. What was his name again? Ginsburg. Ginsburg is telling you there's something about the Ten Commandments you need to read. And anyway, so here's the book by Ross Nichols, the Moses Scroll, a lot easier to read, if you ask me, than Dershowitz's book. He equally defends the Shapira Scrolls, or tries to, and claim it's important to look at. And then the English translation of those same passage of the Ten Commandments and all of these scrolls, in fact, in English, is in Dershowitz's book at page 159 and following. All right. Now, I just want to complain about something. So I want to say, Mr. Dershowitz, you don't help us. He does these the only comparisons he does is between one version of the Deuteronomy in Hebrew, the Masoretic text, to the Valediction of Moses, which he gives it this letter V. He's like creating his own authority of like how to refer to it. Just call it what it always was, the Shapira Scrolls. You may not like the fact that it has Shapira's name on it. Get back to being a scholar. Put SS on it. And that's what it is. It's the Shapira Scrolls. It's simply all it is. And then we don't have to have this issue. Is it Moses Scroll or is it Valediction of Moses? It's simply the Shapira Scrolls. You don't like it. You have to clean that dirt off of that name by improving it, not by resanitizing it with names Moses Scroll or Valediction of Moses. No, that's sanitization by what? You don't like the fact that the victorious party has identified what this is as a complete and utter forgery. So don't do that. Don't try to clean it up that way. Clean it up by proof. All right, that's what I'm going to say. Now, but I want to keep showing this to the people who's reading here. Look at all this stuff, all these comparisons, always with Hebrew, 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 Hebrew. Nobody does any comparison. And now he does mention one time the Decalogue, and he compares it to the one in the Masoretic versus the what he calls V. I call it the Shapira Scrolls. That he makes a comparison, but he doesn't give us the Hebrew word. Right? There's no way to know what he's talking about unless you are a scholar in Hebrew. And these books are meant for us. I mean, particularly the Moses Scroll by Professor Nichols. But this one also was intended, I believe, that the layperson could also make conclusions. And I don't think it helps even scholars to be just thrown at them the Hebrew, because you're writing in English everything else. Why not take the time to tell the people what this is? Anyway, so it just goes on and on and on, all these examples I could give you. So I think we need to clean up this presentation so that people can actually test it. Okay. But one thing I could detect was there is a complete removal of the blasphemy command. So you don't have the original 10, you now have 9. But a new one was added, and that makes it 10 again. And the new one is do not hate your neighbor, which is really the inverse of Jesus. Do not love your neighbor. Okay, so if you do not hate your neighbor, you must love your neighbor. Is implied in this new 10th commandment, and that again ties into our last video, which shows that Mr. Shapira, before he killed himself in shame over this being found a forger, belonged to a church that not only made people at their confirmation know and memorize the 10 commandments, but they also had to memorize the principle of love thy neighbor as yourself. Just so obviously completely matching what you see in the new 10 commandments. Now, I also want to complain against Wikipedia and other sources, as I've already said, that they misrepresent that the 10 commandments are still here. No, there's one missing, and that's the key fact: removal of the blasphemy command, major change. And then you have the replacement of that with what I just told you, the love thy neighbor from Jesus by using the inverse: do not hate your neighbor, your brother. Very obvious. And then in the last episode, we showed you that is the belief system of the church that he belonged to in Jerusalem, a messianic type, pre-messianic version of Jewish Christianity in 1883. So they wanted to at least get back some of the law and Jesus' command to love your neighbor by just hiding that it's a corruption or a forgery by making a little change. Do not hate your brother is what they did, I believe. And that's what I'm going to show you. And forgery was detected by Ginsburg using mentioning multiple times the 10 commandments was where he found the problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a comparison one by one. And we're going to use the Moses Scroll text by Mr. Nichols. He gives an English translation. So does Mr. And let me show you here. Mr. Dershowitz says the same thing. If you need to find it, it's at page 159. And so both of them provide an English translation pretty much similar to the other. some small differences. Okay, so let's take a look at each of the Ten Commandments, and we'll then compare which is which and why, and look at what is the obvious reason, if it's obvious, why one is one way and one is the other way. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to see is in the Masoretic text, it tells us the word Yahweh is there. I'm using Friedman's Commentary on Torah 2001, 581, and he relies mostly on the Leningrad text, which is known also, I think, as the Masoretic text. And then over here, it's Elohim, Elohim. And now, just between the little I know about scholarship in this area, is that there's a theory that when Moses writes in the earliest part of Torah, Genesis in particular, Elohim is mentioned. But remember, Abraham doesn't even know the name is Yahweh until later in the book of Genesis. So the name Yahweh isn't being revealed early on, and then it's revealed and then used after that point in Genesis. But the argument is that Elohim was a name that no one knew, not just Abraham, but the whole, Moses and everything. And that was a later invention. Now, this is what I call scholars who use their skepticism and then from their skepticism, they say it's a fact. I think it's just obvious why Elohim was used in the early part of Genesis, don't you? I mean, he's going to tell you Abraham didn't even know Yahweh's name until it was revealed to him. So, you want to keep in suspense your reader, because that's what I mean. You got to look at text and say, well, why would he not say the word Yahweh until that point? Well, it's so obvious. That story would be spoiled if I told you that Yahweh's name was Yahweh too early. I have to keep that away from the audience because I'm going to reveal it later. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I'm just trying to tell you, this text looks to me like it's listening to the academics, Elohim, Elohim, who are saying, oh, it was originally written Elohim throughout the Bible. Yet this is Deuteronomy, where by this point you're allowed to say it's Yahweh because that's been revealed in that certain chapter of Genesis. Anyway, just to show you. Then you shall not have other gods before my face. And so wherever you see the yellow highlight, that means it's entirely missing in the Nichols version. I don't have any explanation why it would be missing. What would be the motivation of a Jewish Christian from taking it out? But that's what it is. It shall not be. Uh, uh, you shall not be to you. There shall not be to you other Elohim. Why not say you shall not have other gods before my face? I don't know why any Jewish Christian would get rid of that. But on the other hand, maybe they don't want to offend Christians, who this is the number one command that Christianity violates, the Trinitarian Christianity violates. And the law of Rome mandated that you could not deny the Trinity without going to jail or being killed. And for many millennia, starting with Justinian, was death penalty or exile. And if you were obstinate, you would be killed if you obstinately insisted the Trinity isn't true. So maybe under the influence and pressure from that, this group is being sensitive that if we say that you can't have another God in front of you, that's going to transgress what Christians are doing. That's what Jewish people would tell you, if they could tell you without being killed or punished or exiled. Um, so being is much more innocuous over here. There shall not be to you other Elohim. That doesn't immediately offend Christians. But if you said you shall not have other gods before my face, then that's very clear. If you have Jesus in your mind as a God in front of Yahweh, well, that would be recognized by a Christian reading on the left, but a Christian reading on the right isn't going to get that impact. And that can be a way of insulating the Jewish Christian sect that he's a part of, Shapira is actually a part of, from persecution from standard Christians. So I'm going to assume he might not be a Trinitarian himself, but he doesn't want to he doesn't want to antagonize Trinitarian Christians, which is the overwhelming number at that point in time in 1883. So I'm conjecturing there. I'm not saying I know that that's what was going on here, but it does. I just know it's for a fact, though, that the one on the right does line up with a modern concern about Trinitarian Christians being offended if this said it is the way it works on the left. And in fact, on the left, none of the Christian Bibles translate this correctly. It doesn't say on the face, which again would stir their readership to concern. Oh, I do have another God in front of my face. That's Jesus. Oh, am I supposed to analyze that? So to avoid that, they change it and they use other words. All right, just want to prove that point. So you can see here, Deuteronomy 5:7, God's before me, before me. It will be one down here. The Septuagint changes that. Here, Brenton Septuagint translation. So this was the translation about the 300s AD, and from Hebrew to Greek. And so the Greek says my face. Dewey Rhymes says my sight. Uh, Before me is standard, but not before my face. Let's see, anybody else? No, that's it. So you have one, and it's the old of all these. By the way, it goes all the way back to the 300s or 200s A.D. as a translation from Hebrew to Greek. Some indication that it was well known way, way, way long ago. What we still see in the Masoretic text. All right, so now let's go to the third commandment. Now look at all the yellow. Remember, the yellow highlight is entirely missing in the Moses scroll, the Shapira scroll. So only this part is in the Shapira scroll, but all of this is deleted. So let's ask ourselves, why would this be deleted? So let's read it over here on the left. And it's the same on the right. You shall not make a statue any form that is in the skies above, or that is in the face of the earth below, or that is in the water below the earth. You shall not bow down to them, and you shall not serve them, because. Now that's all over here. Now what's different? What is removed? Because I, Yahweh, your God, am a jealous God, counting parents' crime on children, and on the third generation, on the fourth generation of those who hate me, but practicing kindness, that's mercy, hesed, to thousands for those who love me and for those who observe my commandments. So God says he visits. He's counting the parents' crimes against him on the ledger of his children. Now the children aren't going to hell, but they got to clean that up. They got to rectify whatever uh, evil their parents had done in idolatry. So you have to purge it from your family tree, in other words, and stop being idolaters. Okay, but God says, "I practice kindness, mercy." So among those, I will give mercy to those who love me and those who observe my commandments. And Jesus quoted from this passage in Matthew 19, verse 17, when he was asked by a young man how to have eternal life. He said, well, how do you read it? And the man said, well, and Jesus says, well, obey the commandments. That's how to get salvation. That's how to get mercy, because it's right here in the 10 commandments. Anyway, so let's continue. This one, the blasphemy command, completely gone. This is important. You shall not bring up the name of Yahweh your God for a falsehood, because Yahweh will not make one innocent who will bring up his name for a falsehood. I want to switch over to that library of all the books of the translation in English of this term, because this is somewhat very technically accurate in a sense, but the concept that is my understanding, and I have researched this word myself, is it's intended that you've said something derogatory about God that's false, of course, but with the intention that it be desolating, that people would be desiring not to have anything to do with Yahweh because you've said something insulting about him. So there has to be in some nature an insult from this falsehood, this untruth about him. So if you look here at Deuteronomy 5, verse 11, in the NIV, for example, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. He will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. So this is why it's called the blasphemy command. It's unpardonable. God will never hold you guiltless if you do this. So we need to have a good, better understanding of what this may mean. And then I just want to show you. So it was translated and sometimes in vain, which it doesn't convey the idea. It has to be false and insulting and derogatory at the same time. So there is, let's see if the Septuagint Bible has this correct. No, that has it in vain as well. So anyway, some say carelessly. I don't think that's right either. No. So if you research it, it has a significance of being desolating. A falsehood that's desolating and drives people away from Yahweh. That's blasphemy, and that's unforgivable if you do that. I just want to make one more comment about this. What's kind of interesting is the Shapira scroll never uses the name of Yahweh. It uses only the word Elohim. And yet and then they don't have this command against honoring the name of Yahweh and protecting it by this blasphemy command. Well, they're being self-consistent. In other words, that since they're not using the word Elohim, why would there be any? Excuse me, they're not using the word Yahweh in the Bible. They're trying to claim there's no knowledge of this name Elohim. So you see, something is doctrinally going on here, which drives them to eliminate a command because it's about protecting the name Yahweh. And so, since there is no name Yahweh, supposedly, according to the scholarly motivation of some scholars to say, oh no, the word Elohim is all that anybody knew, and this was all added much later and all that. So this is very much a reflection of modern thinking of what was really going on in the past, which incidentally, if I can be honest with you, I think that's why these most of these reasons and justification of all these scholars today that it's a valid book is because it matches their presuppositions, which is exactly how Shapira is writing this. He's writing it to people who think that God Yahweh didn't reveal his name until many even after the book of Moses, all 5 books. They think that came up later. And so they're all trying to these scholars today want to rectify this, want to say this is the original. This would confirm our belief system. Dershowitz is explicit in his article with Tabor that it's just a wonderful coincidence that Shapira's scrolls confirm the scholarly idea that the middle section in the book of Deuteronomy after the Ten Commandments, all these laws extensively from chapters, I think it's 12 to 22 in that section, they're all gone. And that was what the scholar said. It didn't make sense because you had the blessings and cursings before the law section, and then you had it all the way at the end of those 10, 20 chapters. So as if you can't have blessings and cursings in 2 different places in the same book. I mean, it's just nonsense to me. But that's what Dershowitz says is a very primary reason he believes in it. Well, then you had this other doctrine that I'm sure Dershowitz is aware of, that Elohim was the real name of God originally, and then the idea of Yahweh being the name was added much later, rather than it fit the story. Why we see here in the early sections of Genesis that Elohim is used, but not Yahweh. But to repeat what I already said is Abraham did not know the name of God, Yahweh, and he asks, what's your name? So, and many people don't realize that even Moses asked, what's your name? And God gave him a different name, and not a name, but an action. I'll be whoever I want to be is what he says. And he doesn't say he's Yahweh. So you have these different reasons that God was holding back identifying his own name for quite a while. But still, God Yahweh said, if you insult me, you denigrate my name, you desolate my name, you speak falsely about me, this is what you're going to get. You're going to be a blasphemer. So I think that was why this was removed, based on modern principles of scholars of what they thought it should have been written as, and they had their theories. I don't believe they're reasonable or correct, but let's say they're even reasonable. But that still would say that somebody is guiding his hand, the high hand of the person who's forging this, to say things that will make scholars want to believe this is the original text to prove their point that they were right all along about theory X and theory Y. That's my running assumption of why this command is gone. And so nobody can say the 10 commandments are still here. So that means the Wikipedia falsely or inaccurately told us that the 10 commandments are still here. No. There's 9 of them. And even those are very modified, as we'll see. All right, I'm not going to take a lot of time with this. I'm just going to show you real quick is everything here in yellow is gone. Everything here in blue is added. Everything here in yellow is gone. 6th command, honor your father and mother. Everything here on the right is added blue. Everything here on the left has been not changed. Everything here on the right is totally added. Everything here on the left hasn't been changed, essentially, and it's all over here on the right, and that in blue is added. Everything over here on the left that is yellow has been removed, and everything here on the right has been added. Same thing over here. This is by the way, Nichols has a different version than, I should say, Dershowitz has commit adultery. So I copied this from Dershowitz. Nichols has desire. So they disagree. So here's Nichols' translation. You shall not desire your neighbor's woman. And over here, Dershowitz has, you shall not commit adultery. That's a big difference, my friend. So just to show you, these guys don't agree on a very material fact, because the actual laws is you shall not covet your neighbor. That's a desire issue. but Dershowitz has you should not commit adultery. So if that's committing adultery is the issue, that was already one of the 10 commandments, different from the coveting command. The coveting command was separate and distinct from the command not to commit adultery. So this is not, and you can see this is in, you shall not long for your neighbor's house. So this is, you shall not steal your wealth. So he has it in the same relationship where you would expect this word to say you shall not covet, but he has not committed adultery. So that shows a real problem. These translators can't agree on the meaning of the word there. That's at least how I read it. So in sum, you have a swapping out of a command here, and it totally fits. What I'm going to conclude is that this is totally a forgery to please modern translators or modern commentators or so-called experts who believe they know better who wrote the law and how it was written and in what order, and not, sometimes you just have to look at things at face value and say, I can't speculate and take this apart and pull it apart. But this is what was swapped, removed. The one about the blasphemy over here, and in its place is put, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. Well, and as I said, that's the inverse of saying you shall love your neighbor, because if you love your neighbor, you can't hate them, right? And so if the command is you shall not hate your brother, that satisfies the same principle, and therefore you are just simply a Christian sect who are trying to plead, and we're going to corrupt the text. We're going to create huge changes. I just showed you all these huge changes. All of this is gone. The Sabbath, all these references that support the Sabbath day are removed. And why would that be? Because a Christian, even a Christian messianic, might actually be observing Sunday to obey the law in his local country. And how is he going to get away with it? Don't put in all these things here, and then maybe you can make more excuses for why you don't obey Sabbath, even as a Jewish Christian. Okay, I don't know his whole church, their theology, but I'm just saying there could be reasons for that. But the bottom line here is nobody should miss the fact that this is not the 10 commandments. It's 9 commandments, and then a substitute one that comes from Jesus' words. And so we'll go, oh wow, it has Jesus' words. That confirms that he was right. He knew what the 10th commandment was. You see what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? It's just there. It's a people-pleasing version, totally designed to actually trap people into believing it's real. All right, God bless. Take care. Ciao, bye.